After the Clone Wars came to an end and the new Galactic Empire was formed by Palpatine, the clone troopers of the Empire were quickly deployed to every former Republic world in order to maintain peace, order and security after the war, at least according to Palpatine. Instead of viewing the heightened military presence as a way to bring order to the galaxy, many planets were furious and felt like an iron fist was being brought down on them. Surprisingly, however, Pantora didn't view the Empire this way and instead welcomed it with open arms, in stark contrast to many other worlds. So why did they do this? Well, the sinister fate of Senator Riyo Chuchi probably has something to do with it. So before we break it down, make sure you're subscribed for more awesome Star Wars lore content. During the Bad Batch's adventures across the galaxy, they found themselves stuck on the moon Pantora, requiring some repairs and refueling for their ship. After leaving their ship with a very dodgy repairman at the landing port, Clone Force 99 eventually make their way into the center of town, where they see something that they really just don't expect. Marching down the street is a large group of clone troopers, brothers of Clone Force 99, in a show of force to the Pantoran citizens. Instead of being booed or heckled by the Pantorans, the clone troopers are cheered and celebrated as the heroes of Pantora and heroes of the galaxy for bravely putting their lives on the line to win the war against the traitorous separatists. So why was the Empire welcomed here on Pantora when so many other planets rebelled against them? Well, unlike those planets, a large chunk of the Pantoran population fully supported the Empire. Part of this stemmed from the separatist blockade of Pantora by Lot Dodd, who tried to get them to join the separatists, which was never forgotten by the Pantoran people. Massive violent riots and conflict was caused during this time, making it a very dark time in the history of Pantora. Because of this, many of the citizens of the moon naturally gravitated towards the Empire because they were formerly the Republic, who defeated the cruel separatists and promised to bring order and security to the galaxy so that the separatists would never rise again. As a result, the Empire had enough support on Pantora to not face a complete uprising. Now, the moon wasn't completely in support of the Empire, with some small groups beginning to form in order to resist the Empire's rule. These groups had very little support in the initial years of the Empire, until sometime later, when Pantora was completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy by the Empire, and were left in a very dire situation, having both their supply lines and food cut off, as well as having their influence in galactic politics completely fade. Struggling to come to grips with their new situation, the Pantoran Assembly, the legislative body of the system, split into three main factions. The first group was called the Appeasers, and they believed that the only way to rebuild their galactic influence and ensure the safety and security of Pantora, they must do everything in their power to integrate with the Empire and submit to a huge military presence on their moon. They believed that without the direct approval from Palpatine and other high-ranking Imperials, their moon had no chance of economic success and would soon be destroyed by the might of the Empire. The Appeasers were the largest faction on Pantora, resulting in increasing Imperial influence wherever they could implement it. Obviously, this stance caused a lot of controversy from other parts of the local population who didn't exactly share their beliefs, leading another faction to form. This new faction was called the Republicans, and they believed that the very existence of the Empire stood against the core principles of Pantoran culture. The Empire's dwindling democracy, ever-expanding military, and harsh restrictions on its citizens deeply offended this faction, and they fought with all of their might against the Appeaser faction to stop the Empire's grip from strangling Pantora. Unfortunately for them, they weren't the biggest faction in the Pantoran Assembly and weren't supported as widely, meaning they couldn't get as many anti-imperial laws as they would like passed. Finally, a third faction was formed, and these guys were considered the most disgusting and disgraceful group to ever form on Pantora. This group was called the Expansionists, and they argued that in order to ensure the survival of Pantora, they must begin signing treaties and forging alliances with nearby slaving worlds, as well as getting their moon into the spice trade and the death stick trade with the worlds around them. Yep, these guys literally wanted to turn Pantora into a slave world and become a death stick and spice hub. Either way, this group was the smallest of the three factions and were deeply opposed by the other two factions, as well as being viewed as abhorrent by most Pantorans. After much fighting and debate over what to do next between the three factions, they eventually decided to build up a small navy, completely filled with volunteers. This move angered the Appeasers faction slightly, because they wanted the Imperial Navy to be the only ones defending Pantora, but even they quickly came to realize that they can't rely on an external force for their protection. Many members of the Republican faction also went rogue, and began to hire mercenaries to make unofficial deals with nearby planets, in order to bring new resources and technologies to Pantora, without the Empire's knowledge. During this period, Senator Riyo Chuchi's treaty still stood, protecting the Tals from Pantoran interference. Most of the Assembly members wanted to respect that treaty, but those in the Expansionist faction instead wanted to re-educate the Tals, in hopes of integrating the two societies together and sharing their vast resources. Now unfortunately, this is where things get much darker. By the time of the Republic's collapse, We know that Riyo Chuchi was ousted from her position as senator for Pantora and replaced by Chiikwe Papanoida, who was actually played by George Lucas's daughter. She's also the daughter of George Lucas's character from Revenge of the Sith in universe, Chairman Papanoida. So even if you haven't watched the Clone Wars, you'll still know who the Pantorans are from Revenge of the Sith and George Lucas's character. Because we know that Riyo Chuchi was no longer the senator for Pantora after the Republic fell, this could mean a few things. The first is that she simply stepped down from her position because she wanted to focus more on local affairs and making change on Pantora itself, rather than on the galactic scale. This is very possible given her personality, and would make a lot of sense given what we know about her. She may have also just hit a term limit which Pantora imposes on its own senators, with the moon opting to choose a new one after they serve a certain amount of time. The far more dark and haunting possibility, however, is that Riyo Chuchi spoke up against Palpatine and the Empire, just like Mon Mothma did in Rebels, and suffered some severe consequences because of it. If anyone is going to be an early dissident against Palpatine, it would certainly be someone like Riyo Chuchi, so this wouldn't surprise me at all. I doubt Chuchi was executed by Palpatine for her actions, especially not this early on in the Empire where Palpatine still needs to give confidence to the galaxy that he is the leader that can bring order, peace and security to them after the Clone Wars. On top of this, Riyo Chuchi is too much of a beloved character for them to kill off screen, so will probably return to Pantora sometime in the later episodes of The Bad Batch, where she may appear. More likely, however, is that she was forced to go into exile after denouncing Palpatine and his increasing power in the dwindling days of the Clone Wars. We know that Riyo Chuchi was already replaced by the time of Revenge of the Sith because we can see the new senator, Chiikwe, attending a meeting with the other senators, so this could tell us that Palpatine pulled the strings to have her removed before he even became emperor. If this is the case, Palpatine ultimately made a terrible mistake in doing this because Riyo Chuchi's replacement, Chiikwe, actually joined Padme, Mon Mothma and Bail Organa in the deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith, where the first seeds of the rebellion were planted. Chiikwe also signed the petition of 2000 along with 1,999 other senators denouncing Palpatine and demanding that he hand back the emergency powers that he had acquired during the war. The petition was also heavily against the introduction of regional governors and moffs, as it would take away far too much power from the Senate and instead place that power in the hands of Palpatine himself, who it was pretty clear that he would be the only one appointing them. This information about Riyo Chuchi and Chiikwe is actually brand new, coming from the Star Wars The Clone Wars Encyclopedia, which released just a few weeks ago, and was written at the same time that The Bad Batch was being written, meaning this information was firmly in their minds. We may even get an episode dedicated to showing Riyo Chuchi in The Bad Batch, as she's a character that so many of us have been waiting to see what happens next to. But either way, let's just hope she wasn't sent to the Spire on Stygian Prime like Luminara for speaking up. We've also got to know what happens to George Lucas's character during this time, as we still have many unanswered questions still left to answer. It's pretty certain that we will be returning to Pantora, and we have to get an update on Riyo Chuchi. My prediction right away is that she's gone into hiding, and absolutely abhors what Palpatine's done with the new Empire. But tell me down below what you think. Thanks so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers guys, hope to see you in the next one.